Dear students, welcome back. This is a series on for MA Political Science. If you are following me, you may be aware. And today we are discussing liberty, the third topic. First, we have discussed political theory, power, and then now concept of liberty. Liberty, I have broken it into multiple parts. And why I'm speaking in English, because many of my students, particularly from Northeast and from foreign country, they complain of not understanding when I narrate in Hindi. So this is an humble effort, endeavor to just speak in English so that you may be able to better understand. Um, first, one disclaimer, please excuse me for my pronunciation that may not be perfect if you are a native English speaking student. Okay, so let us begin this fascinating discussion. Today in part one, we are discussing ancient versus modern liberty given by Benjamin Constant, a Frenchman, and it will be useful for all kind of examinations and for all purposes. So let us discuss liberty, ancient versus modern liberty by Benjamin Constant. A little background of Benjamin Constant and putting his lecture on which this video is based in a context so that you may better understand what he mean when he bifurcated this into ancient liberty into ancient and modern concept. Benjamin Constant was a Swiss French political thinker, activist and writer on political theory and religion. You can see his timeline, 18th and 19th century, first half of 19th century. He witnessed the French Revolution, as you can see from the timeline, and also its after effect. At that time, already the results of both the American Revolution and French Revolution was there to compare how it unfolded. And as we will see that his lecture was to kind of a pointing out fingers toward what happened after the French Revolution. He was, of course, not happy, and he thought that French Revolution established a socio-political arrangement which was akin to ancient time, in which there was a concept of political liberty, but personal liberty was sacrificed for that. So, an American Revolution was just opposite effect. It established a individual liberal or individual liberty based society, and that's why it flourished. So this is in a nutshell how he put this two revolution in comparison and uh, forward his argument that instead of ancient kind of liberty we should aim for modern liberty, which is individual liberty. So in nutshell, he was a committed liberal republican, and he was resurrected as a prominent advocate of classical liberalism. Why I'm saying resurrection, that he was largely forgotten after his death. His thought on liberty were revived during mid of 20th century as an important antidote against the rising trend of totalitarian states at that time, especially in communist world. Of course, the fascism after World War II was almost vanished, but in the new form, the USSR and communist world, it was totalitarian state was rising, and classical liberalism wanted him to help them having developed a opposition to this totalitarian regime, and that's why he was resurrected. It helped because he was not from America or England like many classical thinkers of that time. He was a French, so he was resurrected. So in fact, many times it happens that some philosophers' thoughts are recovered, revived, resurrected to help the thinking of that time. So that was the way Constant helped revive classical liberalism is in mid 20th century. He was a staunch supporter of individual liberty. I already told he believed that the ancient liberty, like that political liberty, has no use, much use in modern time. Of course, he wanted a judicious mix of that, and he wanted that the individual liberty that allowed the individual to turn away interference from the state or society. So liberty in the sense that it is a kind of no interference on human actions and thought and expressions and all, which is very much negative liberty, as Isaiah Berlin later on said. So he was supporter of that kind of liberty. His categorization of liberty into ancient, which he said political liberty, and modern as individual liberty, inspired many liberal thinkers such as Isaiah Berlin, I already told, who wrote Two Concepts of Liberty 1958, and he gave a prominence to Constant's view. And then Frederick Hayek also, he was a libertarian, and he also took his emphasis on trade, commerce, business, and private pleasure as support of the libertarian view of liberalism. Sorry, liberty. His view on liberty influenced movements for liberty in many countries, including Spain, Brazil, and many other countries. This discussion is largely based on his lecture, which he gave in 1819, titled The Liberty of the Ancient Compared with That of the Modern. And I already gave you the context of that. It was in the context of how French Revolution and American Revolution unfolded in 20-25 years, and how, in his view, I'm repeating myself, in his view, French revolutionists post-French Revolution society went towards aiming for the ancient kind of liberty, which was a kind of political liberty, neglecting the individual liberty. That's why, in his view, it was not good. And opposite to that, American Revolution, after that, what society they based, they aimed for the individual liberty. That's why they flourished. So this was a kind of advocacy for individual or personal liberty, and with a justification that in the modern socio-political arrangement and institutional arrangement, you can say, the concept of ancient liberty has got not much meaning today. Of course, a judicious mix of both kind of liberty is required to keep individual liberty intact. So this is in nutshell his viewpoint. Now, I already gave the gist of his arguments, but just a recapitulation. Meaning of liberty had changed from ancient to modern time. First proposition he gives, and why it changed: because the socio-political arrangement and associated institution that could realize liberty had changed from ancient to modern. And he gave many kind of differences, which we'll see. In ancient time, liberty was understood as participation in self-governance. It was exercising popular sovereignty, which each individual has a equal share. Of course, the free individual, free man or citizen, which were in minority, we must understand, and performing public duties of making law, making judgments, punishment, absolving, and all kind of deliberations for public policy. It was a kind of political liberty. You can also say it's a kind of positive liberty, what Isabelle said. But to gain political liberty, individual liberty was surrendered. And surrendered for what? Surrendered for community's common good or societal common good. So individual could not enjoy the personal or private individual liberty in his or her private life. Community was everything, and he was enslaved to communities, and he became a means to community's end, as Constant put it. In modern time, liberty is understood as absence of constraint by the arbitrary will of one or more individual. So in this sense, it is very much like individual liberty, private liberty, or personal liberty, or civil liberties, and negative liberty, as Isaiah Berlin put it. Individuals cherish their individual liberty so much in modern time that they somehow neglect their right to political liberty. And this is not good, even for protecting their personal liberty, as Constant say. But only by judicious, this is a crux of his point, but only by judicious combination of individual and political liberty, ancient and modern liberty, both self-development of individual, self and moral development of individual, and restraint on despotism can be achieved. And this last point was why he was resurrected in the doctrine of classical liberalism in mid-20th century, because he focused the threat of despotism, totalitarianism, if in modern time people don't pay heed to regaining their political liberty, leaving everything to their representative. That will ultimately take away their personal liberty also. This is the point made by Constant. Now, one by one, if we see some of his expounding his propositions. First, how the socio-political arrangement and institutions have changed in ancient to modern time. In ancient time, the state were a small city-state. You can just imagine Athens, Sparta, even Florence, Roman city-state, and all very, very small state. Face-to-face political community of few thousand was possible. That's why the direct democracy was possible. Now modern states are large, very diverse, dispersed, impersonal political community. It is not possible to have face-to-face kind of political community. We don't know each other to stand on a square and then deliberate to make law. Like that is not possible now. because of this size and number of people. Then states represented very heterogeneous people, like one state political community, other Sparta and Athens, very different worldview, many different religion, way of thinking, cosmology, so different people. If this is political community one, political community two, or state one, state two, people were very different. Now what is happening, that inside a state people are very diverse, many language, many culture and many religion, but uh, people have become almost same, homogeneous in worldview, in nature, in their thought. In modern time have become homogeneous. So state represent homogeneous people in modern time, and in ancient time it was different. Then there was a constant fear of war, subjugation, because states were so small, either they will be won or they would have to conquer other. So war was the ever present threat, and people in community only could live or survive. So community was very important for survival and a kind of peace, somewhat peaceful kind of life. This is not now in the modern time, more peaceful and stable life. There is no threat of that kind of constant warfare, and community life therefore is not necessary for secure individual life. Individual can live in private most of the time without any support of the community. So this had changed. And another change is the commerce, because at that time in ancient time, Consta say that war was the only means to secure security, independence, and also as a means to earn quick buck or quick profit, because you gain land, you gain a lot of wealth, booty, and you share and become very rich quickly by winning the war. But in modern time, war has been replaced by trade, commerce, business, economy. So trade and commerce has become prime means to earn profit, less recourse to war. So that gave a different kind of requirement of liberty or personal liberty in modern time. Uh, and in ancient time, of course, trade commerce were had less importance. And then there were some institutions which helped private subjugation to community life. And that was ostracism, or here it is not written in next slide, ostracism or surveillance and censorship, and that institutional support is also not in modern time. Their importance has valid or diluted to some extent. Of course, he is writing 1819 now. Those surveillance and censorship has again raising their head, we can see. Then institute of slavery, he also compare that gave in ancient time free men lot of time to deliberate on public issues or participate in public affairs, which is now not possible because there's no slavery. People have to do their own work, so they have outsourced their political duty to their representative in the liberal representative democracy. There is the danger he sees, that we are neglecting our political liberty. And the life was based on duty, self-sacrifice, and collective good, where individual was supposed to sacrifice his personal interest for meeting the or achieving the collective good. And man was seen as a means to an end. End was the societal common good. Here, that this thought is now reversed. Like right, individual right, and personal interest preferred over common good, societal common good. Man is considered end in itself, as Kant said. So this way he compared, this is the justification why the conception of liberty had changed from ancient to modern time, because of the change in socio-political arrangement, as I have explained, from the ancient to modern time. Now, if we little bit explain his ancient liberty, many of them will be repeated, of course. You can remember this. He says, Consta say that ancient liberty can be thought of like a political liberty, participating. And what is political liberty? Participating in self-governance as free man, exercising social power, shared social power, you can say, in participating in deliberation in his Consta's own language, in words in his lecture. In participating in deliberation for public decisions about war and peace, forming alliances with foreign government, lawmaking, pronouncing judgments, in examining the accounts, the actions and omissions of government, lawmaking, pronouncing judgments, in examining the accounts, the actions and omissions of magistrate, in calling them in front of assembled people, in accusing, condemning, and absolving them. So this kind of, you can say, what our representative does, what ministers does, or what a public functionary does in modern time. People were doing the job themselves. Of course, minority of the people, again, please remind, not all, free men only. Woman, slave, foreigner, and many other were excluded from this liberty. So it is exercising collectively but directly popular sovereignty, kind of direct democracy, sharing socio-political power among citizens of the same fatherland. In another word, same thing. It was a kind of collective freedom, freedom to the people, not to the individual. The goal was collective common good life of the community, but complete subjection of the individual to the authority of the community. But this came at the cost. The cost was the personal liberty, individual liberty, subjecting individual to the cause of the community. So there was no individual liberty. All private actions were subject to severe surveillance. अनिल, मॉर्निंग मॉर्निंग अभी लगे हुए हैं मीटिंग की तैयारी में, घर से मीटिंग करेंगे। तो तुम यदि आज फ्री हो तो हम इस मीटिंग के बाद धूप में सेकने जाएंगे, ठीक है? और यदि यदि फ्री होगे तो हम आराम से बात करेंगे तुमसे बेंच पे बैठ के, ठीक है? मेरी मीटिंग तो खत्म होगी करीब 11:30 बजे। तो आई डोंट नो वेदर उसके बाद तुम कैसा तुम्हारा रहेगा। हाँ, यदि तुम फ्री रहोगे, कोई मीटिंग वूटिंग नहीं रहेगा, तो विल हैव सम चैट, ठीक है? हाँ, ओके, बाय बाय। So all private actions were subject to severe surveillance, censorship, and ostracism, as we have discussed already. So individual faced a totalitarian community life as well as state law, which he was one of the author. Of course, he only made law by deliberation with other fellow free citizen, but that state law regulated social custom and all parts of life, both public and private. So both in community as well as state law, through both community and state law, his private life was strangulated, constrained. So there was no personal liberty per se. Thus, an individual almost always sovereign in public affair was a slave in private relation. So sovereign in public but slave in private domain. And this has just reversed say in modern time, that we are sovereign in our private domain, but nominally sovereign in public domain or political domain, where we exercise our sovereignty only a few days, like voting and all. So ancient had no notion of individual life. They did not regret also. Um, because why? Because individual rights or personal right, as we say, as we enjoy in modern time, was not perhaps possible in ancient time because of the constant fear of warfare and necessity for the community life. So individual even could not think of that they can enjoy that kind of freedom, watching Netflix in private and doing whatsoever what they want in private life. So they were very happy sacrificing their small value which they attach to individual right to gain the political liberty. The situation has become just opposite in modern time, where we attach so much value to our individual or personal liberty that it will be very difficult for us to sacrifice this for a nominal political right which we don't attach much value to. So another point Consta make, that man was like a machine, mere cog in the social organic whole. And this the same notion the Hegel and Rousseau gave, that society is an organic whole and individual is mere integral part of that. So that kind of thought also Consta, by referring this to a great thinker, he says that man has become mere cog in the social organic whole, or cog in the wheel. So they sacrifice their individual liberty for political liberty. Many times we have repeated this. And what for because again I'm repeating that share in social authority was big thing, and which consoled or more than compensated their lack of private enjoyment or personal freedom or personal liberty. So they were happy being enslaved in private domain, but being sovereign in public domain or political domain. So this is a whole concept of ancient liberty by Constant. Many things we have already discussed about modern liberty, just to many things will be repeated. Constant say it is a kind of individual, personal or private liberty. We can equate it by civil liberties also, that freedom of speech, expression, religion, conscience, praise, association, to live according to one's own conception of good life, what Rawls says or classical liberalists say, and peaceful enjoyment and private independence, as we do in modern time most of the time, enjoyment of security in private pleasure and guarantee of these pleasures, that that our private domain will not be interfered with as fundamental right. We get in India and many other countries, US and all, Bill of Rights sort of, and that right is a right of civil liberties or individual liberty against the state, mostly against the society also, but against the state, not constrained by the arbitrary will of one or more individual. That is the negative liberty in negative sense, as Isaiah Berlin categorized. So it implies also rule of law, that equality before law, constitutional government, that is a limited kind of government. Government is in boundary, limited by the constitution, not cannot act arbitrarily. It guarantees civil right against the state, already discussed, plus political right. And it also implies political right, right to vote, to hold political office, political equality, political participation, and all that kind of right which comes with the political right. The individual, independent of his private life, sorry, independent in his private life, but sovereign only in appearance in public political domain. Already we have discussed. Sovereign in private, but nominally sovereign in political domain, because he has outsourced this to his representative, and he's largely a bystander, just watching what is going on from the sideline. So he is able to exercise sovereignty rarely, as we know, leaving aside governance to the representative liberal representative democracy, negative liberty in sense of classical liberalism. Many times we have discussed all this. So he just make a dichotomy, just like Isaiah Berlin, negative versus positive liberty, same way ancient versus modern. And he also gave a rationale that why concept of liberty, the semantics of liberty had changed from ancient to modern time. A very purposeful. And again, to remind you that his dialogue was to kind of a corrective action which he warranted in post-French Revolution socio-political arrangement, that we should aim for liberty in the sense of modern liberty, that is individual liberty, as America did after revolution, and should not have gone back to the ancient concept of liberty, what France did after the French Revolution. This is his dialogue is for that kind of a political action, you can say. This is just a recapitulation. You can very well just see for your exam or other. I'm not going to discuss this very thing, what ancient liberty is, modern liberty as per Consta. But finally, what I want to say that this is the crux of his thought, that it's not that political liberty should be sacrificed. Because if political liberty is sacrificed, your individual liberty in modern time will have gone. So this is the thing he wants to say. And why he says this, that individual liberty is the essence of human freedom in modern time, no doubt. Without that, we cannot enjoy our life in modern time. But political liberty is equally important, Consta say. Why? Not only for satisfaction or happiness, but it is for self-development of an individual, moral development of individual, regaining the essence of being human. So it is kind of what Aristotle say, human flourishment is only possible when you gain political liberty. Why it is so? Because when you do political activity, when you make law, you are author of law, you think from your higher self, of course, altruism, and kind of you become a very, very developed moral agent to think about all, think about society, and that makes you a kindly morally developed self. Many, many thinkers said that, Rousseau or Hegel or Gandhiji or many other, but that is a kind of merit in that. Aristotle said that state ensure human flourishment. Plato says, and that somehow it is maybe true also. So, and also he says that political liberty is not only helping you self-development or moral development or human flourishment, but also act as an antidote against despotism and failed democracy. Wherever people neglected their political liberty, became aware citizen and regained the political domain from their representative and actively kept watch on their political representative, either democracy will fail or it will turn into totalitarian or despotic regime. So it is an antidote against that. So only by protecting and exercising political liberty, individual liberty can be protected and enjoyed. This is the third justification he gave, argument that if you are not protecting or exercising your political liberty, you cannot protect your individual liberty, because in totalitarian regime, your individual liberty is also gone. What happened in many totalitarian regimes we know. But individual liberty cannot be sacrificed for gaining political liberty, as happened in ancient time, because the cost now attached to the individual liberty is too high to be sacrificed for gaining political liberty in modern time, as happened in ancient time, because at that time individual liberty has many small value attached because of the peculiarity of the community life and essentiality of the community life, warfare and fear and all that kind of physical threat. So now we cannot be supposed to sacrifice our individual liberty for gaining political liberty. So what is the way out? That is, only there should be a judicious balance between individual and political liberty. We must be an aware citizen. We must keep watch over our political representative. We must take them into account whatever they are doing, and should have the uh, wherewithal to resist them, civil disobedience, change them if they are going in a arbitrary way. So that, he says, that is required to uh, maintain and protect and enjoy your individual liberty in modern time. So this is in nutshell what Consta say. Okay, thanks for watching. If you are an Indian student, you can download this guide for your exam, for objective type exam. You can write to me on through mail, Twitter, and website is this, where you can get PDF and all that, and also Telegram channel you can follow. If you're watching from other country than India, then welcome to this channel. And if you are my student from India, very much welcome on this platform, and we'll have many more lectures in English in future if you like it and you comment that you are liking. So okay, bye. Stay safe.